Okay, class, we're going to do a quick run through on why each juror changed their vote to not guilty. If you can't see this too well, I will post this picture up on the blog. There is no homework tonight. The first thing you need to know is that the quiz is going to be on Monday. You can thank one of your classmates for that, Michaela, thank her. So it got moved to Monday. Ask in tomorrow's class if you want to know why. So first thing you need to know, 8. Why did he come into the case to believe that he's not guilty, that there is reasonable doubt, and why did he go on to convince everyone else of the same thing? Well, for convincing fact, he bought an identical knife. Shouldn't have. It's against the law to buy knives. He bought one anyways. But that firmly convinced him that there is reasonable doubt. Now, for an emotional reason, he felt that the kid had a bad lawyer. The district-appointed attorney, defense attorney, did a bad job, didn't bring up many facts. It seemed like everybody, including lawyers, kind of had the foregone conclusion that he was guilty. So he distrusted the testimonies. He just had a bad gut feeling. So, however, he agreed to his secret ballot vote, which he abstained from, and he said if anybody else votes not guilty, we'll continue to talk. But he let them have the decision. They passed out the slips. When it came back, there was a not guilty vote. Everybody accused 5, but really it was 9, the old man who changed his vote. He didn't have any real factual evidence that he based his not guilty vote on. He really claimed that the reason he voted not guilty was that he respected 8 for standing alone. And we also noticed that early in the play, 8 made kind of a non-verbal communication to him, a connection, as he kind of grabbed 9's shoulder when 9 was getting upset by 10. So that is why 9 decided to change his vote, and he wanted to hear more. Next up, 5 does change his vote. Not a huge surprise. If you're kind of unclear where this is, it's page 35. We might have figured a few things. We know emotionally 10 had just insulted people from the hood, which he obviously was one of them. And we could also say that because he's a nurse and he's nursed that trash several times a week, we know that he is somewhat sympathetic towards other people who might come from the slums or the hood. So that might be a reason why he might have been a little more sympathetic towards the defendant. However, when it comes down to it, the last fact that he kind of agreed with was that he believed the L train noise was too loud for the older witness to hear the words, "I'm going to kill you." Now going to 11. 11 is the next one to jump on the bandwagon. That is on page 40. That's also another difficult one. He actually brings up the point, he doesn't think the kid would come back to the scene of the crime, especially if he had wiped off the fingerprints from the knife. What reason does the kid have to come back? So if the kid did it, he argued that the kid probably wouldn't come back. Now, on the emotional side of things, 11 was also insulted by 10. Big surprise there. 10's a bigot, doesn't like anyone different from him. So that's why the European was probably insulted by him. Next up, it starts to rain and the vote becomes tied. That's because one big piece of evidence is kind of pointed out. 8 decides to reenact the timing of the old man getting out of his bed and walking around the apartment. They find out that it took almost 3 times as long as the old man had said. It took 42 seconds versus 15. And that is what ultimately you could point to changing 6 and 2's mind. They changed their vote right after that little demonstration. Now there's a few other things that were happening there. For 6, the average guy, earlier he did work in a house next to train tracks, and therefore he also believed that you couldn't hear the words, "I'm going to kill you," while a train is roaring by. That's what made him start to lean, but it wasn't until the timing of the old man did he actually change his vote. Similarly, for 2, earlier on in the play, he shared that he had yelled at someone once at the bank, and we presume it was the words, "I'm going to kill you." And so therefore he believes that that doesn't necessarily mean you will kill someone. That might have started him leaning, but again, it wasn't until 2 was timing the reenactment did he actually change his vote with 6. Now you might say there's some emotional reasons for both those guys. 6 had a bit of a problem with 3, because 3 was a little harsh with 9. So 6 was like, don't mess with old people or I'm going to lay you out. And similarly for 3's probably emotional reason was that he was kind of always bullied throughout the play by, 2's was always bullied by 3 throughout the play. That could have been 2's emotional reason. Next up we have 7. We're never really quite clear 7's motivations, aside from he just wanted to go home. Now, when the tie became 6-6 and it started to rain, his ball game presumably would have been canceled, but still, he said the words, I'm sick of all this yakety-yakking, I'm going to change my vote to not guilty. It's kind of curious, because even him changing his vote doesn't really kind of speed things along all that much. It just goes from 6-6 to 7-5. And maybe we could conjecture there were some other reasons, but there's no other clear fact why he changed his vote, aside from the fact that he just wants to get out of there. Next up, we have 12 and the foreman. At the same time, they changed their vote to not guilty. In the next vote, when they have the discussion about the knife angle. Alright, 3 made it very clear how he would stab a man 7 inches taller than him. But 5 comes right on his heels and says, hey, anyone who's had any practice with a switchblade knife would do it underhand. This convinced 12 and foreman and the vote that immediately followed. Now 12's a little tricky. We don't know much about his emotions. He doesn't really get in too many fights with people. He doesn't really develop any close allies with anyone. So emotions really isn't kind of part of that for him. However, 12 does change back, because 3 and 4 convince him that the only testimony that really matters is the old lady's testimony. So, let's see here. Now we can talk about the foreman a little bit. There might be some emotional component for him. 10 called him a kid, K-I-D, kid. He wasn't very happy with that. Also, 7 and 3 had a little bit of a history of going out of order when speaking, kind of preventing Foreman from doing his job. That might have played a little bit of a role with his emotional component. Next up is the big final piece of evidence. We talked about the eyeglasses, how the female witness did have eyeglasses, and obviously nobody wears eyeglasses to bed, so it's plausible that she might not have clearly have seen the murder take place. She just might have assumed it was the defendant. This was enough to convince 12 to go back to not guilty. In the movie he did wear glasses himself as well. But it was also enough to convince 4 that yes, in fact, that is the kind of the nail in the coffin, and he changed his vote to not guilty. Let's talk about 4 a little bit here. Now, the eyeglasses fact was the one that finally did it for him. However, there was something earlier where 8 did kind of make a point to him. 8 did say that he quizzed him about the reliability of memory. And 4 started to sweat. The one and only time he started to sweat was because he himself could not remember all the details of the movie he saw a few days prior, and he wasn't under emotional duress. So that may have started to influence him a little bit, but it was the eyeglasses. Now 4 is kind of really known to be just very factual and not let emotions get into it. The only time he ever showed emotion was when he told 10 to shut up and sit down. So we could possibly argue there was an emotional component there, but really he was a fact kind of guy. On the other side of that, we have 10. 10 went on his big bigot speech, saying that we got to put them away and get them before they get us. And everybody ended up shunning him, broke him down. Afterwards, he said he did not care. So 10 never voted on the facts. 10 was all emotional, and he just gave up. He said he didn't care what they did. And then when he was grilled about it, he said not guilty. Kind of interesting. little interesting change there. And a little surprising about his character that he would finally say not guilty. Finally, we have 3. Also, like 10, really the facts didn't matter so much towards the end. It was really what he changed. He realized that the defendant was not his son, and he realized he was voting only because of his anger. Therefore, when it's pointed out it's not his son, he breaks down and says he changes his vote to not guilty. Thus, we have our unanimous vote. All right. So, you need to know these things definitely, and make sure you do that study guide. We'll post a copy of the study guide on Edmodo. And good luck. Make sure you know the times of things, the timing of things, and the numbers, and that should be it. Thank you.